I'm really gratified to see people coming into the room. I think that this is the fifth or sixth time that I've spoken here, and I only just realized it was. I was talking to Andy Brandt yesterday, and he has managed to see all of my presentations at this conference. And he says, "Paul, do you realize you have never spoken on the same topic twice in all this time?" And yeah, it's true. And I'm talking about something completely different today that I've never talked about before because it bugs me, and it bugs you too, and I know it does. I'm going to do something a little different today. I'm doing an experiment. I always try to do something that I've never done before. In this case, I am going to be getting data from the audience. And so there's a number of polls and questions. We're going to be learning from each other because I myself only have 35 years of experience. We have considerably more. And so I'm going to ask you to join this website, and you'll be able to follow along in the slides as I go. And also, from time to time, I'll be collecting some data from you. So let's test and see how this works. First poll, I see you've got 64 people, 66. Do you presently manage people, or are you an individual contributor in an organization in which you have a manager, or are you self-employed? You don't manage anyone, and nobody manages you. Wonderful. I like to have an impact. And one of the things I like about working with managers at corporations is if you can make a manager in a corporation just a little bit better at their job, a little bit more humane, you can impact all of the people beneath them, sometimes for a few layers down. And so, wonderful. This is for you, although there are going to be elements of what I'm talking about today which are aimed at people who have managers. And even those of you who manage people, you are part of the process too. You have a manager yourself. You have one-on-ones with your manager. You have performance reviews with your manager. So this should be helpful for you. Let me first introduce Lazy. Lazy is the best pet I have ever had. Lazy is a guinea pig. We got her as a runt. Her ears are torn because her brothers and sisters were horrible to her. And she is an amazing, amazing animal. Intelligent, brave. This is Lazy meeting our cat when we brought the cat home for the first time. 3 times her size. What an animal. What an animal. She owns that place. I used to make her sushi. This animal is loved. An absolutely lovely, lovely animal. And I tell you this because I'm going to be gathering a lot of data from you, and I don't want you to be offended when I say that you are my guinea pigs today. And why? Why are you my guinea pigs? If you were, and I know that this is a Greek poet, but if you were an accountant in Republican Rome, and somebody offered you a wish, and you knew your Greek mythology, so you knew better than to wish for eternal life, you wished for eternal youth. And you managed to survive all of the wars that Europe has seen, the fall of the Roman Empire, the Ottoman invasion, the Crusades, the first 2 world wars. You're still an 18-year-old accountant. And nobody's going to give an 18-year-old accountant a CFO position, even if they have 2,000 years of experience. This woman would still have less experience being managed in a corpo than we collectively have in this room. And that's why we are in a fabulous position to gather information about what it's like and what we want. So what I'm going to talk about is how to do better one-on-ones, what to do if you're not the person who's doing the one-on-one, if you're the recipient of the one-on-one, and something that's really dear to my heart because I'm approaching this season myself, as are the rest of you, performance review season. So first, one-on-ones. This is where I'm going to get some information from you. Take a few minutes. How much time do we have? Take 4 minutes. Grab the person next to you, and I want you, well, first think in your own mind, who was the best manager you have had in your entire career. Imagine that person. Remember them. Have you got somebody? Now, grab somebody in the audience, someone close to you, and I want you to tell each other, a story about the best manager you've ever had. As you wrap up your conversations, feel free to contribute what you learn from each other through the word cloud we're building up here. This is fun. This is not what I expected. Although, I feel a pattern here. How many of you are familiar with professional coaching as a technique, school of thought? I want to see if it's just a bias of mine. But I'm seeing a lot of professional coaching concepts up here. Empathy, presence, listening, focusing on development, caring, compassionate, not judging, not an ignoramus. Yeah, that's always nice. Not necessary, but always really nice. There's lots about listening, and I wish there was a way of clustering these thematically. But take a moment, and can you see what I'm seeing here? And this really corresponds to some of the studies that I've read. For example, Harvard Business Review recently did a study that showed a very strong correlation between people's opinions of their manager's ability to give feedback and people's opinions of their manager's ability to listen. Better listeners, better feedback. Better listeners, better feedback. But this is not going to be a presentation about coaching, although it is going to be a presentation about coaching. Let's get a little more information about our experiences. What is it that your manager, most of you have a manager, primarily uses your one-on-ones for? Is it to get status updates from you? Is it to give information to you that you need from the organization? Is it just to get to know each other, to be friendly and to develop a relationship? Is it about your career development? Solving problems that you have, or you solving problems that they have? Or something else? And I've left it blank for those who don't have any one-on-ones at all. Because if you didn't, most people would choose all of them. We are humans, after all. We're complex. Over a course of a career, you have lots of experiences. But I wanted to see what really stands out for people. And the data that I'm getting here is very similar to the data that I see in other studies, is that most one-on-ones are used for status updates or for problem solving. And your personal career development looks like the lowest. So we've got 64 people here. It looks like the voting is mostly over. All right. So you meet once a week, once every 2 weeks. Well, we'll get to that. But you meet with your manager, and it's mostly about status updates, information sharing, and problem solving, and not about your career. Very interesting. Next question. What would you want more of from your one-on-ones with your manager? Would you like more advice from her? Would you like more support with the kind of struggles that you're dealing with? Would you like feedback from them? More compassion? More context? Or something else? You can tell this is an agile crowd. So many people are terrified of feedback. We love feedback. Okay. This is interesting too. I'm surprised by what's happening with the feedback number. I'm not too surprised that something else is, that advice is pretty low. Okay. Feedback, context, and support. You'd like more of from your managers. Okay. Looks like we're just about got it. All right. So now that I've got an idea of what your experiences with one-on-ones with your managers are and what you would like more of, in my role, I coach a lot of managers because I'm a coach, and mostly what I do in organizations and privately is professional coaching. And on a high level, if I could just send everyone who manages people to a professional coaching workshop, I would. If I can get them all certified in a professional coaching certification program, I would. I can't, obviously. But there are some things that they can do rather simply in order to improve their interactions with people. And the first one, let me ask you, if you're a manager and you need budget approval to increase headcount, and so you've got a meeting scheduled with the CFO to get approval for budget for increased headcount, and on the day of the meeting, the CFO is out sick, what do you do? Go to their house. That's it's important. You reschedule the meeting, right? You need that meeting. I have been asking many, many people, and I have not found a single person who tells me that if they have a one-on-one with their boss and it falls on a holiday, the one-on-one is rescheduled. Has it ever happened to any of you? Some of you have experienced it. It's incredibly uncommon. Incredibly uncommon. But as a manager, you kind of have to ask yourself, in the month before salary reviews, is it fair that one of my employees gets half as much face time with me as every other employee because she's Jewish? And her one-on-one fell on a Jewish holiday when I was working and she wasn't. Something really special happens when you treat one-on-ones as if they were as important as your budget review meeting. It sends a clear message. And one of the things I tell line managers is, you've got 3 jobs. They're all important jobs. One of them is managing the bureaucracy, all of the logistics and the accounting and all of the paperwork and meetings and such that you have to have in order to keep the ship moving. The other is creating an environment in which your employees can grow and become the best people they can be. And the other is developing those individuals. Now, it doesn't matter if all of the paperwork is submitted on time, if you've got a whole group of people who are not doing their best work, who are not developing as people, whose careers are not progressing. That is actually the most important part of your job. And for most line managers in large corporations, almost the only face time they ever get with an employee is in those regular one-on-ones, which makes that meeting an incredibly important meeting. You get 1 hour a month, 2 hours a month, at most 4 hours a month in order to develop, encourage, and support each individual person who reports to you. Every single one of those hours is precious, and it's the most important part of your job. So something really magical happens if you treat it like it's important. I had a line manager once, and as Tomek was saying, I go back every once in a while and work for a few years in a corpo just as an individual contributor, just so I can empathize and understand what it's like to be in that position. And I had a line manager once who was always at his computer just fighting with mostly budget and headcount. And every single time it was time for my one-on-one, it always looked the same. I'd get up, I'd walk over and stand respectfully away from his desk in the open space. And usually within about 3 or 4 minutes, he would wrap up whatever he was doing, and then we would go off, we'd sit down in a private place, and he was clueless as to what to do next. And we would just gab for half an hour. And he would say, okay, good meeting, and go back to his desk. One-on-ones benefit so much from knowing why you're there. You are there to support the other person's career development. The meeting is about them, and the goal is supporting their career development. And you were saying this morning, Lisette was saying this morning that a meeting has a really low bar to be a good meeting. It has to have a goal, it has to have an agenda, and it has to have start and end on time. I don't entirely agree with that. It should start on time, but I'm a big fan of meetings ending when they're done. I hate the way meetings... If you have a meeting that lasts 30 minutes and you finish everything on the agenda in 20 minutes, it's okay to leave. But yes, it's a really low bar. How many one-on-ones have a goal and an agenda? You've raised your hand twice. You're in a wonderful place. I'm so happy for you. Now, I'm going to draw on my facilitation experience now. Who owns the agenda in a meeting? The facilitator or the participants? So, in a one-on-one, you're there in order to support the agenda of the employee. And the employee's agenda is usually one of two things. Either they're focused on something very immediate, and they just need help. And that's fine. As a coach, that happens too. Sometimes I'm working with somebody over a long career arc, but this particular week, they've got a big problem, and they're not thinking about their career. But I still have to be focused on that arc, so that when the next meeting comes up, I can say, okay, you're out of that problem now? Can we get back to your career and work on their career? But it's about them. It's about them and their career development and their career growth. If you keep that in mind, it's a lot easier for you to know what to do with that time. The next piece of advice I give people, and this is good advice anywhere, talk less. Talk less. In a one-on-one meeting, if you're trying to develop a person's career and they're the ones in control of the agenda, then let them outline what they're trying to do, what they're trying to accomplish, where they want to go. If they need help doing that, the best way to use your voice is to ask questions, good questions. And remember what I said earlier about the correlation between listening skills and feedback? The same applies here. In order to ask good questions, you can find books, 101 coaching questions, but the truth of the matter is that professional coaches, their questions tend to come from one of two places. All professional coaches have a handful of questions that are just near and dear to them that they use a lot. Like for me, when somebody is just running around in circles around a problem, one of my go-to questions is, what is it exactly that you'd like to have happen? Get them thinking forward, get them thinking about what success would look like. And most coaches only have half a dozen of these. Where the real good questions come from is curiosity. If you're really listening to someone and you believe that they're competent at their jobs and that they're capable of solving their own problems and they're capable of developing their careers, then you can be really curious about what they think and what they want and what they're thinking about trying. And from that curiosity arises the best questions. And it comes from deep listening, deep compassion, deep empathy, and mostly curiosity and respect. And lastly, this is something I just added at the end because I just got done rereading $1 Trillion Coach, and I think the author makes a good point about Bill Campbell, which is that individuals don't create value in organizations. Groups of individuals do, and the team matters. So as an afterthought, I added this last one, which is that when you're dealing with individuals, you also have to be thinking about the organization as a whole. and how they're delivering value to the organization. So one of the things that can be very useful to do is also think about the collaboration. Ask them how their teamwork is, how they're working with their team. Chances are their other team members are also reporting to you, and so you're in a great position to mitigate miscommunications or conflict. So ask them about how well they're working with their team and how their relationships with their team are, because that might give you opportunities to improve the environment, which is that second bit of your job. So that's the advice I give. If I just get 10 minutes with a manager about how to do better one-on-ones, that's my advice to them. But many of you aren't managers. You have to go to one-on-ones and sit through them, but you're not in control, and you've got these managers who just want status reports. So first, I want you to think about this. What can you do, or what advice would you give to somebody in this position? They go to a one-on-one with a clueless manager who just demands status updates and doesn't really know what to do in order to support the employee. What advice would you give to the employee in that case? I'm kind of hoping that you come up with everything that I would have said otherwise. Tell them how you feel. Tell them what you need. Change jobs. Although we've got a lot of data collected here, it sounds like in most places it's not better. Give them feedback. Yes, ask for what you need. Bring an agenda. Oh, I love that. Can you imagine a boss who doesn't have an agenda? Their employee shows up and says, this is the agenda for our one-on-one. These are the things I want to talk to you about. Okay. Quit the meeting sooner. Oh my goodness. Is this how this works? I told you this is the first time I've used this. This is an experiment. Tell him to chill with all the status reporting. Yeah? I've noticed every time someone talks about a manager or a CFO or something in here so far, they've been using masculine language. Just observing. Not all managers are men, although most bad managers are men. Ask about it. Okay. And tell what you need. I'm seeing 3 big themes here. 1, take control of the agenda yourself. 2, express your what you need to your manager. Tell them what you'd like from them. And give them feedback. All right. Wonderful. So you've pretty much discovered for yourself the same advice that I would give to people in this case. 1, managers do need to know what's going on. And if they're using your one-on-ones for status updates, it can be really useful to listen to the questions that they ask, find out what information they need from you, and then to find a really efficient way of getting them that information. Asynchronously if possible, create dashboards or give them a report the day before the meeting that contains the information that they're going to ask you about in the meeting. And if you've got to do it face-to-face during your stand-up, during your one-on-one, time box it and be succinct. Say, okay, this is the status section. Here are the things you need to know. And then move on to the rest. Another thing you can do, and this is something that didn't come up from our brainstorming session, is to coach yourself in public. So you can sit in front of your boss and say, I want to think through this problem. Can you give me a few minutes? Let me first lay it out. This is the challenge that I'm facing. I'm finding that I'm not as good at speaking up to authority as I'd like to be, and I'm not really sure how to handle that. Hold on a moment. Remember, talk less, listen more. Hold on a moment. Let me think about this. Let me get some ideas out there. I could read some books about influencing up. I could role play with my team. hold on, don't tell me what to do yet. Let me get a few more ideas. So you can self-coach with them and teach them the kind of environment for thinking that you'd like to create. It's fine to ask them not to give you advice. Like, I would like to hear your ideas, but let me first think through mine first. And finally, exactly what you said, ask for what you need. If you're getting mostly status updates and problem solving, and you'd like more compassion, or you'd like more coaching, or you'd like more career development, then just be upfront with that and say, one of the things that I would really like to get from you is a space in which we can talk about improving my career, a space in which we can talk about my goals and how I'm making progress towards my goals. It would be a very unusual scenario in which a line manager says, no, that is not something I'm willing to do for you. If in their mind this meeting is all about status updates, then you might have a different meeting. You might say, okay, let's have a status update meeting, and then have a meeting for developing my career and how I can perform best inside this organization. And then lastly, and this is dear to my heart because since I do go back and work in corporations from time to time, I am the recipient of performance reviews. And one of the nice things of being old and experienced and going into corporations in order just to experience it, not because I need to pay my mortgage and I have more options, is that I can go into a performance review without my ego or my ability to feed my family resting on it. I can't imagine what it's like for a person for whom the performance review really matters to their careers, because they, even for me, they are horrible, soul-sucking experiences. So, first, your ideas about performance reviews. And the first question I want to ask you is, how often does your manager give you feedback on your performance? Roughly daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, or yearly? Seeing a terrifying number of yearlies coming up here. Unofficially. So it looks like we've got 70 people on here right now. 40, 60, 70. Okay. Pretty close. You know, when I see this yearly, I think what terrifies me there is that the day before that performance review, you can't possibly have any idea what to expect. And humans just love uncertainty, right? Especially when their job and their salary depends on it. All right, that's terrifying, but pretty much what I expected. Here's one. How do you usually feel after a performance review? More motivated? Anxious? Satisfied? I got what I wanted from that performance review. Frightened? Annoyed? Something else that's positive that I didn't think of, or something else which is negative that I didn't think of? These numbers so far are very consistent with other findings. That I've seen in the literature. But yes, predominantly annoyed. I could have listed other negative ones. I often leave feeling disgusted. Occasionally amused at just how incompetent it was. Okay. I'm very satisfied here to see that there are some positive responses. Let's see what we can learn from this. My advice to managers when giving performance reviews. Number one, the biggest, most important, never, ever surprise an employee in a performance review. Nothing that you say in a performance review should be something they haven't heard before. The performance review is not the time for them to hear for the first time that you were really annoyed about how badly they gave that presentation 3 months ago, or how many sales they made in the last quarter. That's not the moment for them to discover that you're unhappy. And when you are expressing your observations, stick to facts, not judgments. You said you were going to deliver this. You delivered this instead. Is this correct? There's a gap here. Talk about that. Not, I don't think you're bringing your full enthusiasm to work. I don't think you're doing your best work. I don't think you're as motivated. Don't talk about what you think's going on in their head. Talk about the facts that are actually happening. Ideally, and this actually relates to one of the later ones, talk less. If you've been having regular one-on-ones about people's development, and you know what their goals are, you know how they're progressing towards their goals, and you've been coaching them through that process, then by the time they get to the performance review, they should be able to conduct it themselves. It should be just an extension of the one-on-ones. So here we are. We've set these goals. They've changed and evolved over time. Talk me through how you feel about how you've done towards them this year. If you do it right, an employee can conduct their entire performance review. But lastly, and I think this is an important point, sometimes it's not idyllic. Sometimes you do have an employee who is not meeting expectations, not just their own personal goals and expectations, but the expectations the company has for them. And not only should you have been working closely with this employee up to this point so that they're not surprised by the performance review, but if you do find yourself in a situation in which you have to give an employee a bad performance review, my recommendation is to not drag them through the whole excruciating process. Most companies' performance reviews require the employee to do a self-assessment up front, and then they share it with you, which I always thought was terribly unfair because a lot of managers just use that as they don't do their own assessment. They just wait for the employees to do it, and then they piggyback on that. Don't make them go through that whole process of trying to justify everything on paper. If there's a real problem, bring them in, tell them exactly what the problem is. We have certain expectations, you know what the expectations are, you are not meeting them, and there are going to have to be some kind of ramifications. We're going to have to put some kind of a system in place in order to get you up to what is required of you, either training or support, or if you have other ideas, we should do those. But if you really have a problem employee, then they require special attention. And I think that having them go through the process as though it were an ordinary performance review is unfair to the employee, and it leads to those unpleasant surprises. There should be no surprises in a performance review. And lastly, and I think this is a big one that I think agile people should get. If it hurts, and most of us have agreed that performance reviews hurt, what is the principle that we use? If something hurts, do it more often. An annual performance review becomes pretty painless if you do quarterly performance reviews. Even less painful if you do monthly performance reviews. The annual one could be the one that's submitted to HR. But if you incorporate elements of the annual performance reviews into every other one-on-one or even every one-on-one, then by the time you get to the performance review, it's already done. And everybody knows exactly what's going to happen in it because you've been building to it the whole year. So if it hurts, do more of it. You'll get better at it. You and your manager together will get better at talking about your performance. And so that's the advice that I have. I've almost run out of time, but I definitely want to take some questions here.
All right. First of all, thank you very much, Paul, for this one. Just one comment, all those advice came from the person who was going to his performance review with your resignation in your doc, right? So you get a resignation all the time.
Oh yes, I always have my resignation letter in my pocket when I go to a performance review. It really feels
like having the experience. I'm gonna start. We got like no time for questions, so I'm gonna go with. Let's go with one. And that is interesting one. I'm gonna ask this one. What is agile and example in this topic? I love this question. I know this is hard to answer, but I'm gonna ask this anyway.
All right. How about this? Respect for people?
And my comments to this one will be, you've been there from both sides. As a manager, as the owner of the company, as an employee. So I'm going to ask the second one because that was a quick one. Have you ever met HR that is not useless? There is some assumption in this question, I believe.
I have never met an HR that was useless. Every single HR department I've ever seen is very good at what it's there for, protecting the company from risk.
And once again, thank you very much, Paul, for your story.
Thank you.